The 23andMe board of independent directors just wholesale up and resigned on September 17th. It's always funny to see this kind of announcement on the official site of a company, but here it's like the letter they sent to the company and to the CEO saying, after months of work, we have yet to receive a fully financed, diligenced, and actionable proposal that is in the best interests of the non-affiliated shareholders. This is the board speaking. And we believe that the special committee and the board have provided ample time for you to submit such a proposal. So they're looking for the CEO to provide a plan of action, a strategy that they think that they can buy into and they can believe in. They didn't get one for 5 months, according to this letter. And so in corporate speak, although we wholeheartedly support the company's mission, blah, 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 we've decided to leave. And one of the reasons here also is, besides that delay, they cited the concentration of voting power in the CEO's hands. And this is like not a nothing board. This includes Roloff Botha from Sequoia Capital, partner at Sequoia Capital, right? So these guys generally know what they're talking about. Look, from the outside, Yanev, I don't know what the hell 23andMe is doing. That company sort of had the same product for a very long time and haven't seemed to find a way to turn that into a thin wedge to anything. And there's no real reason for me to have a long-lived relationship, to retest, to connect to other services. They're just aggregating demand with this really interesting test, but they don't seem to be pointing it at any kind of supply besides the DNA test and some ancestry features. So who knows what the hell they're doing, just burning money. And the board is tired of it, and they resigned en masse. This speaks to a whole bunch of topics, board oversight, governance, voting power for the CEO, sort of the reverse of the OpenAI Sam Altman incident where they fired him. So Yanev, what do you think this signals for 23andMe? What do you think it tells founders about maintaining voting rights? Where the hell do you think 23andMe is going with all this capital and burn rate and very little innovation? What's going on over there?
Yeah, well, I mean, the short answer, I think, is it's just not a very well-run company from the outside. That would seem to be the case. And yeah, there are a few lessons there. First of all, it is worth pointing out that 23andMe's share price is down 96.5% from its IPO, more like 97.5% from its all-time high. So, when you have such a sort of destruction of value, then of course you get a bunch of very angry investors. And so the board's feeling a lot of heat. And yet, what seems to be happening is that the company hasn't really defined a good direction, like you said. And, I'm trying to dig back into my memory bank of 23andMe. It was founded by Anne Wojcicki, who is kind of a Silicon Valley royalty. She's the sister of Sue Wojcicki, who actually sadly recently died, but who was basically, she was the person who gave Larry and Sergey of Google the garage and was a senior and very well-respected executive there since the start of Google. And so this was a company that I think got more hype and more excitement around it from investors because of its links to Google, which were unofficial, just to be known. It was a family connection, let's say. And so, it always had this hype about it that was a bit difficult to justify. And again, not a space I've looked into closely, Chris, but I think they just got done in by Ancestry.com. Ancestry.com was this kind of boring thing that was just for old people, trying to figure out who their third cousin twice removed living in Iceland was. And then when this DNA testing technology became effectively a commodity, they had something that 23andMe didn't, which was this huge database and a real use case. If you send your DNA to Ancestry.com, you find out all the people you're related to, and they already have all the tools in place.
So 23andMe does that now.
I'm sure it does, but Ancestry.com dominated that space. So they had the product that really mattered, and then they could basically integrate into having the DNA testing, whereas 23andMe started with the DNA testing and had to build the product. And again, I've not analyzed this industry closely, but from what I can tell, Ancestry.com is slaying. It is, if you have anybody over 50 in your life, they're on Ancestry and they're like, oh, I just found out that, we've got someone who was related to the Holy Roman Empire and, Anyway, the other thing I wanted to just mention here is you asked about dual class shareholders, and it's a shame we don't have Emil on the show today because we've debated this previously, but overall, I'm of the opinion that dual class shareholder structures rather, lead to poor governance, right? And it's all well and good if you have a founder that you believe in and who continues to do the job well, right? And you're like, okay, it can give them the power to do things that publicly traded company with lots of different shareholders, some pension funds and whatever might not be able to do, and generate more value. But what is true on the way up is also true on the way down, right? Which is that you have no control over these people. And so what does it mean to own shares in a company that has a dual class shareholder structure? It means your shares are held hostage. You have a very weakened form of ownership. I would argue it barely counts as ownership when you are buying these shares. And so, yeah, I don't think it's good. I think power does corrupt, and we can often be guilty of exceptionalism, right? Where we say, okay, just because dual class shareholder structures have worked for some companies, notably Google and Meta, that they're a good idea to give the founder that much power. But I think in general, it's a bad idea, right? In general, governance is a good thing. And I think it's always dangerous to learn from the exception and say that should be the rule. And I think 23andMe never had the firepower, should never have had the firepower to be able to demand a dual class shareholder structure. And somehow they got away with it. Like I said, I think the family connections were part of it. And now that's coming back and biting everyone in the ass.
Yeah. So, I have two minds about this. I'm a big believer in founders and the founder journey. I'm a big believer in the crucible of creating your own company and pulling some potentiality into reality. I'm a big believer in the ability to move fast and break things, to coin a phrase, founder mode. But you're right. It is optimizing for exceptional people who can do exceptional things. And so by definition, it is the exception. But boy, are those exceptions exciting, right? And boy, are those exceptions valuable both to the shareholders, but also to society. And boy, is the opposite often a recipe for meddling incrementalism. Like shareholders who are obsessed with the next quarter instead of the next wave and the next great achievement. There are absolutely pros and cons for these two models, and absolutely founder mode and concentrated governance power in the hands of a few or a founder only works in exceptional circumstances. But I'm most interested in the exceptional circumstances, and this is a good example of a failure state. It's really quite disheartening and disappointing. There's a lot more potential, I think, for this company than they've managed to wring out of it. With the billions of dollars spent and the creativity, I'm sure that's within the walls of that company, it doesn't seem to have laddered up to much new net value over time.
Yeah. So, okay, TLDR, we went on a rant, but like poorly managed company is poorly managed. Dual class shareholder prevents anything from being done about that. The end. I think that's really the story here.
The end, and be careful about the founder you bet on
Well, yeah.
and the journey you're going on.